Most people are waiting. Right now, as you watch this video, millions of people are waiting for the perfect moment. They're waiting for motivation to kick in. They're waiting for the economy to get better. They're waiting to feel ready. They're waiting for someone to tell them they're good enough. And here's the brutal truth that nobody in your life is going to say to your face. That moment is never coming. Not because the world is unfair. Not because you were dealt a bad hand. But because waiting itself is the problem. The people who are actually winning. The ones building businesses, creating freedom, living lives they designed on purpose. They didn't wait. They moved while they were scared. They built while they were broke. They stayed disciplined when they had every reason to quit. This video is not going to feel good. It's not designed to. It's designed to be the conversation that changes the trajectory of your life, if you're brave enough to hear it. So sit down, pay attention, because the most successful people in the world quietly practice is about to challenge everything you think you know about how success actually works. He starts with a question that makes most people uncomfortable. How many times have you waited to feel motivated before doing something important? And if you answered honestly, probably more times than you'd like to admit. Here's what she wants people to understand from the very beginning. Motivation is not a foundation. Motivation is a weather pattern. It comes and it goes. It shows up uninvited on a random Tuesday morning when you hear the right song or watch the right video. And then it disappears the moment life gets difficult, the moment the alarm goes off at 5 in the morning, the moment the results don't match the effort you put in. She explains that our culture has built an entire industry around selling motivation. Motivational speakers, quote pages, highlight reels, 30-day challenges. And none of it, not a single piece of it, is designed to actually change your behavior long term. It's designed to make you feel good right now. And feeling good right now is the enemy of building something real. Think about it this way. If motivation actually worked, the gym would be full every single day of the year, not just the first 2 weeks of January. If motivation actually worked, every person who bought a business book would be running a successful company. If motivation worked, you wouldn't need a second alarm, a third cup of coffee, or someone else's success story to get you out of bed. She believes the sooner people stop chasing motivation, the sooner they start actually building their life. So what does she replace it with? Discipline. But not the kind of discipline people think about when they hear that word. Most people hear the word discipline, and they picture someone waking up at 4 in the morning, working 16-hour days, never taking a break, running themselves into the ground until they collapse. That's not discipline. That's self-destruction dressed up as productivity. Real discipline, she explains, is simpler and far less glamorous. It's the ability to do the thing you said you were going to do, even when you don't feel like doing it. That's it. That's the whole game. She uses a simple example that most people can relate to. Think about brushing your teeth. Nobody wakes up every single morning motivated to brush their teeth. Nobody lies in bed at night, fired up, excited, inspired to go to the bathroom and stand there for 2 minutes. They just do it. It's automatic. It doesn't require an emotional state. It doesn't require external validation. It just happens because it's a non-negotiable part of the routine. Now imagine if you treated your business the same way. Imagine if you treated your health, your relationships, your craft, your finances the same way you treat brushing your teeth. Not with passion, not with motivation, but with quiet, consistent, non-negotiable action. That's what separates the people who talk about changing their life from the people who actually do. She points out something that most people miss entirely. They see successful people, and they assume those people are naturally more motivated, naturally more disciplined, naturally more driven. They look at someone running a thriving business and they think, they must have something I don't have, some kind of fire inside them that I was never given. And that story is comfortable, because if success is about something you were born with, then you're off the hook. You don't have to try. You don't have to change. You can stay exactly where you are and blame it on genetics, on your upbringing, on the fact that nobody ever taught you the rules. But she's not interested in comfortable stories. She's interested in the truth. And the truth is that the people you admire most, the ones who built empires, who went from nothing to something, who turned their worst moments into their greatest leverage, they didn't feel like it either. They just did it anyway. There is a phrase she comes back to again and again. Feelings are information, not instructions. When you wake up and you don't feel like working, that's information. It might be telling you that you're tired, that you need rest, that you've been pushing too hard. That's useful. Listen to it. But it is not an instruction. It is not a command. It is not permission to stop. The feeling of not wanting to do something does not mean you are excused from doing it. She explains that the biggest shift she ever witnessed in high-performing individuals is the moment they stopped asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" and started asking, "Is this what I said I was going to do?" One question puts feelings in charge. The other puts commitment in charge. And commitment, real, serious, written down, spoken out loud commitment, is the only thing that actually moves the needle over time. She challenges the viewer directly. Write down 3 things you said you were going to do this week that you haven't done yet. Not because you couldn't, but because you didn't feel like it. Because life got in the way. Because you were tired, distracted, overwhelmed, or afraid. Now ask yourself, what would your life look like in 5 years if you kept making that same choice? If every week you let your feelings override your commitments? That answer is the most important thing you'll hear in this video. And the work starts the moment you decide that the answer isn't good enough for you anymore. She doesn't ease into this one. She says it plainly, directly, and without apology. The moment you stop blaming other people for your situation is the moment your life actually begins to change. Not before, not gradually, immediately. Because blame is the most expensive habit a person can have. It feels free. It feels natural. It even feels justified sometimes. But what it costs, in time, in energy, in lost opportunity, in mental bandwidth, is staggering. Every moment spent identifying who is responsible for your pain is a moment you're not spending on fixing it. She walks through a scenario that most people have lived through in some version. You build something, a project, a business, a relationship, a plan, and it doesn't work out. Maybe a partner let you down. Maybe a client cheated you. Maybe the market shifted. Maybe someone took credit for your work or spread rumors or made a decision that knocked you off course. And every single one of those things is real. The frustration is real. The injustice may be completely real. But here's the question she wants you to sit with. Okay, that happened. What are you going to do now? Because that's the only question that matters. Not who caused it. Not whether it was fair, not whether they deserve consequences. The only question that moves your life forward is, what are you going to do right now with what you have from where you are? She calls this extreme ownership, and she is relentless about it. Extreme ownership doesn't mean you pretend bad things didn't happen. It doesn't mean you smile through injustice or let people walk over you. It means you accept, completely, without reservation, that the quality of your life is primarily a result of the choices you make and the actions you take. Full stop. Not partially, not mostly. Primarily. She understands that this is the hardest thing for most people to accept, and she understands why. Because the world is genuinely unfair sometimes. Some people do start with more. Some people face obstacles that others never will. Some people are handed opportunities that were never available to you. All of that is true, and none of it is useful. Not a single bit of it makes your situation better. Not 1 minute spent calculating how unfair your starting point was will add $1 to your bank account, 1 ounce of muscle to your body, or 1 relationship of genuine depth to your life. She tells people something that sounds harsh until they actually think about it. Victimhood and victory cannot coexist in the same mind at the same time. You get to choose one, every single day. And she notices that most people make that choice unconsciously. They don't sit down and say, "Today, I choose to be a victim." It happens in small moments. It happens when you tell the story of why something didn't work in a way that puts all the responsibility outside of yourself. It happens when you explain why you haven't started yet by listing everything that happened to you. It happens when you spend more time processing who wronged you than you spend building what's next. She isn't saying those feelings don't matter. She's saying they cannot be the headquarters of your identity. There's a distinction she draws that changes everything for the people who truly understand it. There's a difference between what happened to you and what you do with it. Everyone on earth has a list of things that happened to them. Everyone has reasons. Everyone has wounds. The entire human species is walking around with a collection of experiences that shaped them in ways they didn't choose. The question is not what's on that list. The question is who holds the pen going forward. She describes watching people transform in real time the moment they pick up that pen, the moment they stop narrating their past and start designing their future. The shift is almost physical. There's an energy change, a posture change, an entire orientation toward life that changes when a person decides that they are the author of what happens next. Now she takes this concept deeper, into business specifically. She explains that one of the most common failure patterns in entrepreneurs is the habit of externalizing problems. The market is bad. The team isn't performing. The product wasn't perfect. The launch timing was wrong. The algorithm changed. And while some of those things may be factually true, she says there is always, a version of the question that starts with, "What could I have done differently?" That's not a question designed to make you feel guilty. It's a question designed to put you back in the driver's seat. Because if the problem is entirely outside of you, then you are also entirely powerless to fix it. And powerlessness is the one thing that will kill a business faster than any market condition. She talks about the entrepreneurs who scale quickly versus the ones who stay stuck at the same revenue number for years. The difference, almost universally, is not the product. It's not the team. It's not the niche. It's the founder's relationship with ownership. The ones who grow ask, "What am I missing? What could I do better? Where am I the bottleneck?" The ones who stay stuck ask, "Why is this happening to me? Why isn't this working? Why is it so hard? Both sets of questions are looking for answers, but one set of answers leads to action. The other leads to a story. She pushes the viewer on something specific. Think about the last time something didn't go the way you wanted. In business, in a relationship, in a personal goal. Now write down, honestly, without defensiveness, the role your own choices played in that outcome. Not to beat yourself up, not to spiral into self-criticism, but to identify the one or two decisions that, if made differently, might have produced a different result. That exercise, done with genuine honesty, is worth more than any business course, any coaching program, any strategy session, because it gives you something no external resource can. It gives you agency. It tells you that you have the power to change the outcome next time. And that is the most important thing a person building a business or a life can believe. She is very clear about something that most people in the self-improvement space are not willing to say out loud. Building something real is supposed to be hard, and it's going to stay hard. Not temporarily hard. Not hard until you find the right system or the right strategy or the right mentor. Consistently, relentlessly, uncomfortably hard. The nature of ambitious goals is that they require you to operate beyond your comfort zone. And your comfort zone doesn't expand without resistance. She introduces a concept she calls the mental war, and she explains that every person building toward something significant is fighting it constantly. It's the internal battle between the voice that says keep going and the voice that says who do you think you are? Most people don't talk about this voice. They pretend it doesn't exist, or they're embarrassed by it, or they've convinced themselves that the successful people they admire don't have it. But she has spoken with enough high achievers to know everyone has that voice. The difference is not whether you have it. The difference is whether you let it run your decisions. She describes the anatomy of self-doubt in business with uncomfortable precision. It doesn't usually show up as full-blown panic. It's subtler than that. It shows up as procrastination disguised as research. It shows up as perfectionism that delays every launch. It shows up as the need to get one more opinion before making a decision. It shows up as the sudden urge to redesign the logo when the real problem is you're afraid to make the sales call. She says the antidote to this is not confidence. Not in the way most people understand it. People wait to feel confident before they act. They think confidence is a prerequisite, something you need to acquire before you're allowed to start. But she explains that confidence is actually a byproduct of action. You don't get confident and then start. You start repeatedly, imperfectly, and the confidence follows. This is a distinction that changes everything. Because if you're waiting to feel ready, you're waiting for something that only comes after you begin. It's like waiting to get in shape before you start working out. The shape is the result of the work, not the condition for starting it. She talks about the development of mental toughness as a training process, not a personality trait. You are not born mentally tough. You build it. The same way you build muscle, through stress, recovery, and repetition. Every time you do the hard thing when you don't feel like it, you make a deposit into your mental toughness account. Every time you stay consistent when the results haven't shown up yet. Every time you sit with discomfort instead of running from it. Every time you have the difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Every time you make the decision you know is right even when it's not popular, All of that builds the internal infrastructure the successful people operate from. She also addresses something that doesn't get talked about enough in motivational content: the emotional cost of building something. People see the outcome and they think the journey was straight. They see the polished brand, the successful launch, the growing team, the healthy bank account. And they assume the person who built it was always composed, always certain, always moving forward without hesitation. The mentally tough person is not the person who feels none of that. It's the person who feels all of it and keeps moving anyway. She brings up the concept of what she calls the identity ceiling. This is the point at which a person's vision for their future runs up against the story they've told themselves about who they are. You can want a big life with every cell of your body and still be held back by the belief, buried beneath the surface, that you're not the kind of person who actually gets that. That belief is the ceiling, and no amount of strategy, marketing, or hustle will break through it. The ceiling has to be broken from the inside. The work of mental toughness, she explains, is largely the work of identity renovation. It's the ongoing process of examining the stories you carry about what's possible for you, who you're allowed to become, and what you deserve, and consciously replacing the limiting ones with something closer to the truth. She's firm about one thing: this is not about toxic positivity. She's not asking anyone to pretend they're fine when they're not. She's not asking people to plaster affirmations over real problems. She's asking people to be honest about the internal narrative they're living inside, and to ask whether that narrative is actually serving them or quietly destroying them. She ends this section with a direct challenge. For 1 week, she asks that viewers notice every time they tell a story that begins with "I can't," or "I'm not the kind of person who kyo," or "that's just how I am." Every time you hear that sentence start forming in your mind, pause. Ask, is that the truth, or is that the habit talking? Because habits can be changed, stories can be rewritten, and the person you're capable of becoming is almost certainly not limited by the story you've been carrying. She shifts into the business philosophy that separates the operators who build lasting companies from the ones who build impressive-looking things that collapse under pressure. And she starts with a statement that makes a lot of people in the entrepreneurial world uncomfortable. Most people are not building businesses. They are building attention for themselves. There's a difference, and the difference matters enormously. Building attention means you're optimizing for how things look. Follower counts, revenue screenshots, launch announcements, the kind of metrics that feel good to share but don't actually indicate health. Building a business means you're optimizing for how things actually work. Margins, retention, systems, culture, long-term customer value, operational efficiency. One of those can be faked in the short term. The other cannot. She talks about something she refers to as the vanity trap. It's the pattern of chasing visible markers of success at the expense of foundational ones. And it's addictive, because the visible markers produce immediate emotional reward. A viral post, a sold-out launch, a revenue milestone that sounds impressive in an interview. All of that feels like winning. But she asks a harder question. What does your business look like at the back end? What does your team look like? What does the customer experience look like? What does the conversation inside your own head about your business look like when nobody's watching? Because those are the answers that predict what happens in year 3, in year 5, in year 10. She has a framework she walks people through when they're trying to assess whether they're building something real. It starts with one question. If I removed all external validation from this equation, no praise, no followers, no visible success metrics, would I still be doing this? And if so, why? The answer to that question tells you everything about whether the foundation of your business is solid enough to hold weight over time. She moves into long-term thinking, and she's blunt about the fact that most people are terrible at it. Not because they're not intelligent, but because our brains are wired for short-term reward. Evolution built us to respond to immediate threats and immediate opportunities. We are not naturally inclined to delay gratification, to invest in things that won't pay off for years, to resist the quick win in service of the compounding win. But the compounding win, she insists, is the only win that actually matters. She draws an analogy that lands hard. Imagine two people. Person A chases every opportunity that looks good right now. The quick partnership, the fast cash, the trend that's hot this month. They're always moving, always busy, always seemingly active, but their revenue never compounds. Their reputation doesn't deepen. Their skills don't accumulate in a coherent direction. They look busy without building anything. Person B picks one thing, digs deeper into it every single month, gets better at the fundamentals, builds relationships in one vertical instead of spreading thin across 10, turns down short-term opportunities that don't align with their long-term direction. In year 1, they look less impressive than Person A. In year 5, Person A doesn't recognize what Person B has built. She calls this the boring path to extraordinary outcomes, and she says it almost always beats the exciting path to mediocre ones. When someone comes to her thinking about their business, she notices that the conversation almost always defaults to, how do I make more money right now? And while that's a valid question, cash flow matters, survival matters, it's rarely the most important question. The more important questions are, who am I becoming as a business owner? What skills am I building that will be worth more in 3 years than they are today? What relationships am I investing in that will compound? What operational systems am I building that allow growth to happen without breaking everything? She shifts to talking about decision-making in business, and she has a very specific framework she applies. When faced with any significant business decision, she asks, will I be proud of this choice in 5 years? Will it hold up under scrutiny? Will it compound positively? Or will it create a problem I'll have to manage later? Most shortcuts, she says, fail that test. And most shortcuts that feel necessary in the moment were actually unnecessary. They were just convenient. And convenience is the slow poison of long-term growth. She addresses the entrepreneur who is reading this in a moment of desperation, the one who is looking at their bank account, looking at their struggling business, looking at the gap between where they are and where they want to be. And she doesn't sugarcoat it. You may be in a hard chapter. That's real. But every decision you make from panic narrows your options. Every decision you make from clarity expands them. She closes this section with something that she considers non-negotiable. Know your numbers. Not vaguely, not roughly, specifically. She has met too many business owners who can tell you their revenue and almost nothing else, who can't tell you their profit margin, who don't know their customer acquisition cost, who have no idea what their average customer lifetime value is, who couldn't tell you, if asked right now, what it costs them to run their business for 1 month. That's not a business. That's an expensive hobby with occasional income. She believes financial literacy for business owners is not optional. It's the foundation of every intelligent decision. You cannot make sound long-term choices without understanding the numbers that tell the story of your business. Because without that, you're navigating in the dark and calling it strategy. She has something to say about failure that most people aren't ready to hear. Failure is not the opposite of success, it is the curriculum of it. She means this literally, not as a motivational phrase, not as a comforting narrative to smooth over a setback. She means that the actual content of what you need to know to succeed, the deep knowledge, the operational intelligence, the judgment that high performers operate from, comes almost entirely from failure. She explains that one of the most counterproductive things a person can do when building a business or pursuing an ambitious goal is to develop an avoidance relationship with failure, to spend so much energy trying to avoid mistakes that you slow down your output, second-guess every decision, and ultimately limit the volume of attempts, and therefore limit the volume of learning. She uses a simple ratio. The person who fails 10 times in a year learns more than the person who tries twice. Not because failure is inherently educational, it's only educational if you debrief it properly, but because volume of action, volume of attempt, volume of iteration is the engine of genuine skill development. The perfectionist who won't launch until it's ready, who tweaks and polishes and adjusts and refines until the moment is past, is not protecting themselves from failure. They are guaranteeing a different kind of failure. The failure of never starting. The failure of playing so small that there's nothing to lose. She's not gentle about this. Playing it safe is a risk. It just doesn't feel like one. Now she moves into criticism, because if failure is uncomfortable, criticism is excruciating for most people, and the higher you climb, the louder and more public the criticism becomes. She talks about the reality of operating publicly in any space, and she's been through enough of it to speak from experience. When you build something visible, when you share your philosophy, when you stand for a set of beliefs, some people will hate you for it. Not because you did anything wrong, but because growth and success and visibility attract people who are triggered by someone else's audacity to try. This is not a reason to soften your message. It's not a reason to hedge, to qualify, to make yourself palatable for people who are never going to buy from you or believe in you anyway. She separates criticism into two categories. The first is useful feedback from someone who is genuinely invested in your growth, a team member, a trusted advisor, a customer who experienced a real problem. That feedback is gold. Take it seriously. Set your ego aside and actually process it. Build it into your decisions. The second is noise. And noise sounds like criticism, but it's not. Noise comes from people who haven't built what you're building, who don't understand your context, who are processing their own inadequacy by pointing at yours. You do not have to respond to every voice that speaks your name. You don't have to justify yourself to people who've decided not to understand. You don't have to make yourself smaller so that your success is less threatening to people who haven't done the work. The most powerful response to both empty praise and empty criticism is the same. Keep building. She talks about the internal process of handling criticism that actually lands, the kind that stings because it hits something real. A comment about your leadership, a review that calls out a genuine flaw in your product, a team member who leaves and tells you why in a way that's hard to hear. She says the test of character is not whether you can handle compliments. Anyone can accept praise. The test is whether you can sit with the discomfort of critical feedback, extract whatever truth is inside it, and use that truth without letting the sting of it destroy your forward motion. She advocates for what she calls the 24-hour rule. When feedback lands hard, when your first reaction is defensiveness, anger, or the urge to justify yourself, wait 24 hours before you respond. Not because you're being passive, but because the response you give in the first hour is almost never your best one. If you are being criticized, it means you are visible. If you are visible, it means you are in the arena. And the only place success lives, the only place growth happens, is in the arena. The bleachers are safe. The bleachers are comfortable. The bleachers are full of people with opinions and no skin in the game. And the bleachers never built anything worth having. She wants to dismantle something that she believes is doing real damage to a generation of people trying to build a better life. The curated highlight reel, the overnight success narrative, the idea that success looks like what you see on social media, the lifestyle, the freedom, the ease, the perfectly framed moments of arrival. She is not against success being visible. She is not against people sharing their wins. But she is deeply concerned about what gets left out of the frame, because what gets left out is the entire story of how it was built. She talks about what the early stages of building something actually look like, not in the polished retrospective version that people share on podcasts, but in real time. It looks like long periods of no momentum. It looks like pouring money into something and watching it do nothing. It looks like making offers that nobody responds to. It looks like building a product you believe in and discovering that the market doesn't agree with you. It looks like doubt, sustained, chronic, low-grade doubt that doesn't go away just because the work is good. She says most people quit somewhere in that phase. And the tragedy is they quit not because they couldn't succeed, but because they believed the fact that it was hard meant something was wrong. They compared their chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 20 and concluded that they didn't have what it takes. She has a term for this phase. She calls it the competence desert. It's the period between when you start something and when you're genuinely good at it, between when you commit and when the results reflect that commitment. And the competence desert is long, longer than most people expect, longer than the internet makes it look. But here's what she knows to be true. The people who make it through the competence desert are not the most talented. They are the most stubborn. They are the ones who decided, against evidence, against discouragement, to stay long enough for the skill to develop and the compounding to begin. She talks about shortcuts, specifically why people chase them and why they almost always make the journey longer. She understands the appeal. She genuinely does. When you're in the middle of the hard part, when the bank account is uncomfortably low and the results aren't showing up, any path that promises a faster route feels worth exploring. And she's not going to pretend there are no legitimate mentors, courses, or strategies that accelerate growth. There are. She's benefited from them. But she draws a hard line. There is a difference between compressing your learning curve, getting better faster by standing on someone else's experience, and attempting to skip the necessary growth entirely. The compressing works. The skipping doesn't. Knowledge is not skill, and skill is not wisdom. And wisdom is what you need to build something that lasts. She addresses the people who are building in the age of social media, and she has a specific concern. The speed at which everything moves online has shortened people's tolerance for the natural pace of real growth. She's seen people launch a business, run it for 90 days, and conclude that it doesn't work. She's seen people pivot their entire strategy based on 2 weeks of data. She's seen people quit markets, niches, and business models that were fundamentally sound because they weren't patient enough to let the compounding begin. Stop making forever decisions based on today's feelings. If you're in a hard chapter, that doesn't mean you're in the wrong story. It might mean you're exactly where you're supposed to be, in the middle of the necessary struggle that will make you the kind of person capable of sustaining the success you say you want. She talks about something she calls the success tax, the idea that every level of success comes with a corresponding cost, not financial, but personal. The bigger the business, the bigger the problems. The more visible the brand, the more criticism. The more revenue, the more complexity. She wants people to understand this before they spend years chasing a version of success that they haven't priced correctly. Because a lot of people want the outcome without understanding the ongoing cost of maintaining it. They want the revenue, but not the responsibility. They want the team, but not the leadership demands. She says clearly, choose your hard, because everything worth having is hard in some way. The hard of building is optional. The hard of staying stuck is guaranteed. Which hard are you willing to live with? She wants to bring everything together in a way that doesn't just motivate people to feel something, but actually changes the way they approach the next 24 hours. Because the tragedy of motivational content is not that it's wrong. Most of it isn't wrong. The tragedy is that it produces temporary elevation, a feeling of inspiration and clarity that dissolves by Tuesday morning when the alarm goes off and the work is still hard and the results still aren't there. She wants this to be different. She talks about the concept of building a life that doesn't require escaping. She explains that most people at some level are trying to build their way out of their current life. Out of the job they hate, the relationship that isn't working, the financial pressure, the environment that makes them feel stuck. And while wanting something different is healthy and necessary, that desire alone is not a plan. She says the people who actually build extraordinary lives are not primarily motivated by escape. They are motivated by construction. There's a subtle but profound difference. The escape mindset says, I need to get away from this. It's reactive. It's fueled by pain. And pain is a powerful short-term motivator, but it burns out. The construction mindset says, I know what I'm building toward. Every decision I make today is a brick. It's proactive. It's fueled by vision. She asks people to get specific about their vision, not vague aspirational language about freedom and impact in living their best life. Specific. What does the business look like in 5 years? How many people does it serve? What does the team look like? What problem are you solving and for whom? What does your actual operational day look like? The specificity is what makes vision actionable, and the actionability is what separates the people who eventually get there from the ones who talk about it for years without moving. She also talks about something that doesn't come up often in business conversations, but she considers essential: your relationship with yourself. Because at the end of every business day, behind every strategy and system and team and revenue model, there is a human being who has to be okay, who has to have access to enough clarity, enough groundedness, enough self-knowledge to make good decisions. And you cannot access any of that if you're running on empty. Sleep, nutrition, exercise, solitude, real relationships, honest conversations, these are not luxuries. They are the maintenance requirements for a high-performance human being. She talks about the long game in terms of identity. Who you become in the process of building is more important than anything you build, because companies can fail and be rebuilt. Revenue can disappear and return. Markets can shift and new ones can emerge. But if you compromise your integrity, your health, your character, your relationships, those things are far harder to rebuild than a business. She wants people to decide, right now, what kind of person they're committed to being regardless of the outcome, regardless of whether the business succeeds, regardless of what the numbers say next quarter. A person of strong character in a struggling business is a person who can and will build again. A person of compromised character in a successful business is a person who will lose it, and probably several times over. That is the investment that pays the most compounding interest of anything she can think of. The investment in who you are. She leaves people with this. Every single thing covered in this video, the discipline over motivation, the extreme ownership, the mental toughness, the long-term thinking, the ability to sit with failure, the clarity about what success actually costs. None of it happens by accident. None of it happens because you watched a video and felt inspired for an afternoon. It happens because at some point you make a decision. A real decision, not a wish, not an intention. A decision, the kind that changes how you operate from this moment forward. She believes that most people never make that decision, not because they're incapable, but because they're comfortable enough. Uncomfortable enough to complain, but comfortable enough to stay. And that narrow band of tolerable discomfort is where most lives stay, not because the person wasn't capable of more, but because the discomfort of change never quite outweighed the discomfort of staying the same. She wants to close that gap for you right now, not with a pep talk, not with a promise that everything is going to be fine, but with a question. What is the cost of another year exactly like this one? Not financially, not professionally, emotionally, relationally, in terms of who you are and who you're becoming. If you keep making the same choices, telling the same stories, avoiding the same conversations, and waiting for the same motivation that never quite arrives. What does that cost you? Because time is the one resource that doesn't replenish. You can make more money. You can rebuild relationships. You can restart businesses. You cannot get back the years spent waiting for a permission that was always yours to give yourself. She ends with this. You have already heard everything you need to hear. You already know more than enough to begin. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not a knowledge gap. It is a decision gap. So make the decision. Not tomorrow, not on Monday, not when the conditions are perfect. Make the decision now, because the person you're capable of becoming isn't waiting for you to feel ready. They're waiting for you to decide.